Let's talk to Gisela Stuart, who's here in the studio, chair of Change Britain, was a Labour MP and Leaver. And VIcky Ford is on the line, Conservative MP for Chelmsford. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
First of all, VIcky Ford, when you listen to what Laura was suggesting there, are the options that the Cabinet might sort of coalesce around, or the subcommittee might coalesce around, do they make sense to you?
Well, I think it's all part of trying to find that long-term trade agreement, so making sure that we respect the referendum and deliver the leaving the EU, but also find that deep and special long-term partnership that the Prime Minister has suggested. And when you look at the free trade agreements that Europe has with other parts of the world, none of them fit particularly brilliantly for the sort of deep partnership that would be ideal between Britain and the EU from trading points of view, simply because the trade is so deep. So I think it's very helpful that they're trying to have this meeting today, and that the Prime Minister said she wants to have this smooth, orderly process, and businesses shouldn't face any cliff edges. And this will allow us to look at areas where in key sectors, 21st century sectors like financial services or data and digital or pharmaceuticals and medicines developments, where Britain and Europe would be able to continue to work together without undermining Britain's own autonomy.
And are you also of the view that we should remain in a customs union? So in some areas, crucially, we do not do our own separate deals. This isn't necessarily a deal that's on offer, I should stress, but what some people suggest, including it seems Labour, is that actually to some extent we remain inside a customs union.
Well, one of the things that the Prime Minister has set out from the very beginning is the desire to make sure that there is no hard border in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and that we have as frictionless trade as possible across our borders. And to me, that means that there will need to be some agreement on customs issues.
Right.
And that will mean that when you're putting goods from one side of the border to the other side of the border, that they respect each other's product standards.
Gisela Stuart?
Well, the key thing is we have to be able to negotiate our own trade deals. So what we end up with. But let me take back why I think today is really important, because change will happen. The referendum was about bringing about change, and it will bring about change in the United Kingdom, and it will bring about change in the rest of the European Union, because they're losing their second largest net contributor, and the fact that every single currency requires a deeper integration. And I think the Cabinet, as it sits around the table, has to remind itself of some datelines. Whatever we agree with has to be with this Commission and be voted on this Parliament. If we go beyond that and we have a transition period which is an extension of negotiations...
Yeah. But I want to look beyond the transition period for the sake of this morning. Let's look at what we are aiming for afterwards. And you are suggesting, from what you said right at the beginning of that answer, is that actually we must leave not only the customs union, but realistically any customs union.
Because if we cannot negotiate our own trade deals, if we cannot regain our seat, which we notionally still maintain at the WTO, then I think we will not have left.
And how will we deal with the Irish border issue then?
Well, the Irish border issue, it is the European Union at this stage which says it wants to introduce a border. And if you talk to both sides...
Hang on, they would have to, wouldn't they?
No, they wouldn't have to.
Why not? But under World Trade Organization rules, if we cannot have, they could not simply have no border between themselves. I mean, for practical reasons, but also for legal reasons, they couldn't have it.
But, Justin, the wider context, if there's political will there, and this is what the people in Ireland themselves are saying.
Yeah, but it's not a matter of political will, is it? I'm just trying to get to what is actually the case. You cannot have World Trade Organization rules, can you, where you simply say between two countries, okay, we won't have a trade agreement, but we also won't have tariffs. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that.
But if you're starting at the moment with, in some areas where you've got zero tariffs, if you actually look at the amount of trade that goes north and south, I think about half of it is actually dairy products. You can make it work in practice. And if you talk to people like David Trimble, if they're telling you, who live in Northern Ireland, who know the situation, that you can. But the meeting, the one point which I also want to say is, there's also a question of there's an EU budget which is going to come at 2020, and I think they have to be clear
Yes,
today.
and we have to be, and you've made that point. Yeah.
Automaticity.
Vicky
Absolutely.
Ford?
So what is important today is that we agree, or that they agree, that they want to continue to back the Prime Minister in the work to find this long-term trade agreement, and that their transition period, in order to give business certainty and to have no cliff edges, should be of a known period of time. There's no suggestion that that transition would go on into the never, never end. In fact, the suggestion is that it goes to the end of 2020. That's most likely. But what we do need to keep focused on is giving the negotiating space to find that very special, bespoke, made-to-measure agreement so that we can continue to work with our nearest trading partner.
Hang on a second.
Yes.
The point that Gisela Stuart was making, the fundamental point here, is if we stay in the customs union or a customs union, actually we're not delivering Brexit properly. We're not able to do the kinds of things that people were promised they would be able to do if we left the European Union.
So I think this is why it's so important that we have this negotiation about finding this sort of frictionless border, this new customs arrangement, customs agreement, which means the mutual recognition approach, so that product standards, for example, can be similar on one side of the border to the other. Also, completely agree that Britain should be able to, in the longer term, sign its own trade agreements with other parts of the world and be able to start negotiating those. That is also, I completely agree, the need to have that as well. But we need to have stability now.
We'll see what the Cabinet Subcommittee come up with later on today. Vicky Ford and Gisela Stuart as well. Thanks.